would like to thank you so much for joining us today. Giuseppe Mayer is from AIM Communication, and he's based in Milan. And I think everybody from INCON always really enjoys his session. I know he was the most popular session last year. So I'm going to leave you, Giuseppe, and he's going to talk about the marketing of digital products.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind words. Super happy to know that my last year's speech was kind of interesting. Last year I was in a castle. Today I'm in a said office in Milan, but I hope that the fake wallpaper on my back is something interesting for you. It actually is a real one. So today we're going to talk about marketing for digital products, and I'm super excited about talking to you about these topics because, as I was mentioning to Angela, the interesting part for us is that we not only talk in theory about this concept, but we also try to adapt. So last year we talked about branding by design, and we worked a lot in terms of new brand for I'm Group, and I don't want to spoil anything, but we are going to have some great news next week, and we are going to unveil our new brand identity. Today we're talking about digital products, and I'm going to show you in the final part of the presentation what for us is a new digital product, which is our AIM digital platform. So let's start from the agenda. We're going to talk about building digital products with a specific model that I think is quite useful to understand how to create digital virtual products that are able to create impact. And then we're talking about designing an engagement machine, because every time we create some product, the really crucial part is to create something that sticks in the life of people. And I'm going to show you a few principles that help us in the process. The last part of our presentation is going to be, again, about our AIM Group digital platform. That's something that we developed during the lockdown, but it still is quite huge in terms of value for us and for our clients. So I got something like 60 slides in 20 minutes, so let's light this candle. Let's start from the first part. The first part is about building the digital product, and I'm going to share with you something that I didn't create the hook model, but I think that the hook model is really fascinating in many ways. There's also a book talking about the hook model, so I'm going to share with you some few principles that I think they are super important when we start to think about creating digital products nowadays. So the starting point is that products can profoundly change our day-to-day behaviors. In many ways, we are now accustomed to have our smartphone every day in our hands, and we sometimes use some digital products many times a day. So we open up some apps, we open up some service, and we really think that they are part of our life. So the point here is to understand what's the pattern. How can we follow a checklist, follow a pattern to find out the right functionalities, the right services that we can add to our digital product to make it a great product for ourselves. So introducing to you the hook model. The hook is an experience designed to connect the user's problem to your product with enough frequency to form an habit. So basically the idea here is to try to define an experience that connects a user problem with your product with enough frequency to form an habit. That's a secret sauce to have a great digital product. And of course, we have to define clearly what's an habit. An habit is an impulse to do a behavior with little or no conscious thought, which means that everything that we can do without even thinking about that. And there are plenty of activity that we do every day without even thinking about that. Let's think about washing our teeth or reading a book, or just simply taking up our phone when we are waiting for the underground, okay? But the point here is, how can we build a consumer habit? How can we create a consumer habit? And this, by the way, is something very crucial, very important, not only in B2C world, but also in B2B world. The first framework I want to share with you is the frequency perceived utility framework. So the first question that we have to ask ourselves when we want to create a consumer habit is our behavior that we want to turn in an habit something that is in the red zone, in the habit zone. So it have to have enough frequency to become an habit, and have to have enough perceived utility. Now, some of you might think, okay, now we have a problem, because if I think about McKinsey, for example, talking about B2B company, it's unlikely that the frequency that we are going to buy McKinsey is very often. No, I don't buy McKinsey every day. I don't buy McKinsey service every day. But again, here is a secret sauce to make also that McKinsey also use to create habits. The point is not about creating habits about the simple product. It's creating a habit about the brand, about the perception of the brand that we want to put in people's mind. So taking the example of McKinsey, when you have a product, you're a B2B company, and you have a product or a service that is not so frequent in terms of purchase for your clients, you have two possible choices: content or community. The first one is very interesting. It's about content. And a content consumption habit gives people the opportunity to engage with new information on a frequently occurring enough instance in order to form an habit. So you see, we start from the idea of selling McKinsey. We are now not selling McKinsey, but basically selling McKinsey content. And you know that this is true because every now and then McKinsey deliver the McKinsey Insights. There are few contents. There are many interesting part of their knowledge that they share for free. And the overall idea is to create an habit about going to website and looking for this content that might be useful for your day-to-day job. And then when you have to think about buying a consulting service, what's the first name that comes to your mind? McKinsey. So this is an example, but we have plenty of examples. IDEO is a design company. And again, we don't go and buy a design service every day for our company, but they create a podcast sharing knowledge about design. And this again helps in cementing the perception of IDEA as the go-to place when you need a design service. So you see, we started with the idea that we have to have an habit. To create an habit, we have to be frequent, and we have to create a perceived value. We understand that not every product has enough frequency of buying, so we start thinking about content. But that's a second word. That second word is community. And INCON, in a way, is a way to solve the frequency perceived utility problem, because it allows you to have a frequent interaction with your client without them buying your product, but simply by creating a community habit around the purchase of the product. And I give you a few examples of this one. The first one is Nike. Nike don't only push you to buy their product, but they also enable you to be part of a community, to be part of something larger than just a simple purchase. And the same is for Lululemon. Lululemon creates yoga classes that allows you, even if you haven't bought any Lululemon product, to be part of a community, you know? So to create a community habit on your day-to-day job. So what's the plotting potential here? First, you have to estimate the frequency by looking at the data on current usage or making an educated guess. So you have to start thinking, what's my product? What's the habit I want to create? And how I can estimate frequency by looking at your actual data. And if you find out that frequency is not enough to create an habit, you need at least less than 13 days of an habit to create an habit. But if it's larger than that, if it's longer than that, you can think about content and community to create an habit that engage your people and create a bond. Then the second one is perceived utility. Of course, we can estimate frequency. It's very harder to understand the perceived utility for your customer, okay? So you have to estimate how much utility you can create for your customer. And we have plenty of examples of how to do that. We can use the customer renewal rate. We can use the Net Promoter Score. We can use the conversational line of people talking about our product. Many, many ways to understand if that consumer habit that we want to create is able or not to create a perceived utility for our company. So that's the starting point. We have to find the right habit that we want to put in everyday people's life. Any company that meets these two criteria of a discrete consumer behavior that can be done with little or no conscious thought with sufficient frequency can build a consumer habit. Any company, B2B, B2C, whatever, okay? How can we create this habit? Starting from the idea that we now know what's the behavior that we want to turn into habit. The process is called the hook model. So the hook model is a 4-phase cycle design experience that connects the user problem with your product with enough frequency to create an habit. So this process allows you, if you are able to make your customer go inside this process again and again, it allows you to create a really strong habit and basically a strong product to rely on. So let's start with the first one. So triggers, okay? What's a trigger? If we think about a digital product, usually we think that trigger is usually an external trigger, no? Like the notification, but that's not the case. We have to find the internal trigger. And an internal trigger is an uncomfortable emotional state that we seek to escape from. So internal triggers are always negative emotion: boredom, fatigue, stress, anxiety, loneliness. And these negative emotions prompt us to use a product, to use a service, to use something. Quick example, Instagram. We have a fear of not capturing a moment, then we take the phone and we snap a picture. So when we think about, let's find the internal trigger for our clients, what we have to do, we have to start with customer persona. We have to think about what's the persona using our product. We have to identify the customer's internal trigger. What's the negative emotion that prompts people to do that behavior that we want to create as an habit? We have to establish the context, so time and place when your customer experiences that trigger. Then we have to design an external trigger that allows us to bound with the internal one. And then we have to visualize the association, so a mental connection between two or more things, okay? So that's the trigger part. And the trigger can be anything, you know, it might be a digital application, it might be a notification, but it might be also the look and feel of a vending machine. When you see this beautiful, gorgeous Coca-Cola vending machine, you start to want to drink something, you know, that's a trigger for yourself. You have to think the same way for a digital product. The second phase is the action phase. So the actual behavior that you want your customer to do. And this is where the habit is manifested. And our aim in this part of the journey is to reduce friction as low as possible. I'll give you an example. If you are in a shower and the phone rings, then there's a lot of friction point between you go outside the shower, switch off the water, go and take the phone, try to answer the phone with your hands wet. So every single step is a friction step, no? So when we think about creating a digital product, starting from the emotional negative trigger that we find in the first phase, we have also to think about reducing the friction points that allows us to go to that behavior, okay? Then we have, after the trigger, so the notification that allows us to think about the product, after the action, so for example, to buy something, to open up an app, to read an article, we have the third phase, which is the variable reward. Think about how much is important for you to have variable rewards. You know, if I go and if I'm lucky enough to have people watching to my website because the internal trigger is, if I don't go to their website, I'm losing information. So that's the internal trigger. Then people go to your website. That's the action, you know? So they look to your website, but they don't find any new information on your website. Every time they come, the information is the same. So they don't have a variable rewards. You can imagine that after the first 2 times that people come to your website, they're going to leave it. They're never coming back anymore. So we have to create a variable reward, and we have to think how much of variability does our clients want, and what are the kind of rewards that we have to give to our clients. So there might be many different opportunities in this area. Then we have the final step of this journey, and that is investment. So again, if we take the example of the website, we have the trigger. I need to have more information. I want to find new offers and so on, something else. Action, I actually go to the website. Variable rewards, I have every time different content. But then we need something called the Ikea Effect. You know, have you ever heard about the Ikea Effect? It is the idea that if you build by yourself the product, then you're investing time in your product, then you get value, you give more value to that product, okay? So we have to find this moment in which we ask for our clients for small actions that users take to improve the product with use and increase the likelihood that they come back. It might be whatever, maybe leaving your email, maybe give us the permission to send some newsletter to you, maybe whatever, but it have to be some small action that allows us to have them inside and to lock them in the hook model. So once again, we have to find about the internal trigger that product. Can you hear me?
Giuseppe, speak again.
An error message. So can you hear me or not?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, it was a glitch. Yeah.
What's happening?
That's okay now.
I don't know what's happening. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Okay.
We can hear you now.
Okay, so the hook model, just to rewind a little bit, we have to find the internal trigger that the product is addressing. We have to find the external trigger to address that internal emotional externally. Then we have to find the simplest behavior in anticipation of reward that we want the people to do. Then we have to define the reward that has to be fulfilling and leaving the customer to wanting more. And then we have to ask them to do a bit of work, because if they don't do this bit of work, they are likely not to come back to our product. Okay, so those are the key points to start thinking about your product. And I highly suggest you to think about your product in these 4 areas and try to think what's missing in your service, in your product, to make it something relevant for your customer. But that's just the starting point, you know, because we just create a digital product. Now we have built it up, but we have to find ways to make it interesting for people, to let them engage with your product. So today, great products and big advertising budget is not enough to position our brand as a winner. We need not only a great product, but we need also advocacy and adoption. And I give you another framework to think about, another checklist that you might use in your everyday job to understand if you are doing the right path. How can we drive engagement? We can drive engagement through contagious content. And so here is the steps framework. It's a framework that helps your company creating advocacy and adoption for your product. So you have your hook model, you thought about every 4 steps of your process to create a great product. Now you need to create advocacy and adoption. How you do that? First letter S. S stands for social currency. The better something makes people look, the more likely they are to share. Okay? So I give you, for every single letter, a quick example. Do you remember about LinkedIn a few years ago sending you email like this one? Like, Giuseppe, congratulations. You are in the top 1% of most viewed LinkedIn profile. That kind of communication was really was designed to make you share it, to make you feel relevant. And if you find the right social currency for your product, you can start the engagement process. You can start the adoption process much, much easily, okay? So the first S stands for social currency. Second, T, and T stands for trigger. You have to find about objects, idea, or phrases that reminds others of your brand, of your product, okay? And again, it may be whatever, it may be something that you can see, smell, hear, taste, touch, and have to create a link between that trigger and your product and service. How can you create a trigger? You can follow this easy step. You can start by thinking, who is the person we want to trigger? When we want to trigger them? What we want the trigger to be like? And how we want to trigger them. I give you a very simple example. That's brilliant, no? So this Kit Kat talking and creating content about their product and how they do their product. The product stands for have a break. And they position the product inside a typical calendar for a person with the idea of, okay, you have to have a break with us. You have to stop sometimes. And when you stop, when you think about having a break, you have to think about Kit Kat, okay? Next, emotion, E for emotion. When people care, they share. So if we want adoption and we want advocacy, we have to focus on the benefits, not the future. That's very simple a problem that we, much more us in B2B world than B2C world, we really a lot focus on benefits, not on the feature. I give an example, a clear example of what does it mean to focus on benefits, not on feature. Apple, when Apple doesn't have to showcase a new iPhone, they talk about privacy. Privacy, that's iPhone. So you're talking about benefits, not features. You're not talking about cameras. You're not talking about other stuff. You're talking about the benefits. Then we have public. The easier it is for people to see what others are doing, the more likely they are to imitate. And here you have another example. Again, I'm sorry, but I am a little bit of Apple fan. So when you think about public, you remember when the iPod first came out and there was those white earphone sharing around, and you know that people having that headphone were the one having the iPod. So if you are able to turn out your product to make it a little bit more public, then it's going to be easier for them to create advocacy and adoption. Then we have practical value, and that's very important for B2B service, for B2B company, because you can create, as we see before for McKinsey, we can create a lot of value for our clients simply by putting them together, for example, in the form of 5 steps to create an outstanding marketing plan. How much we can give value to our client by simply sharing story with them, okay? And by doing this, turning the attention to our product and turning attention to our service. And the last one is stories. Stories is about vessels that carry your brand along for the ride. So it might be the key point here is to find the end part of this sentence. When someone tells a story about their experience with my brand, I want them to mention what? What's the point? What's the story? What are you different from others? You know? So again, it's a very long journey, I understand, and I know that there's a very much content that I'm sharing with you today. But the key point is that we talk about how to create a product, and that was the UC model. We talk about how to create an engaging product, and that's the STEPS framework. And every single phase of those 2 frameworks, you have to take them as checklists for your own service and products. Try to think about them. Try to think about how you are using emotion to make people caring about your service, how you are using practical content and practical value to give value to your customer, to make them think about you when they have to decide for your product or service. And this is exactly what we have done with our own products, so the AIM digital platform. The AIM digital platform is a new tool for a new area. So it's a model for multi-directional communication through the most advanced functions designed with a revolutionary approach. So it's a single tool, but with infinite potential. And that's the reason why with my team, I always say to them, it's not a virtual meeting tool. It's much more than that. We have to think about that as an augmented tool that allows you to get the best of the physical world and of the digital world. So it's an augmented knowledge. It takes you to shared experience to an augmented level. It's designed to power any time of event, residential, hybrid, or virtual, and it's optimized for connection and for the integration of any type of third-party services. And above all, what's the internal trigger for a client looking for a solution in the event marketing? Is an anxiety of not controlling every single step of it. So when we design this product, we have in mind that they have to allow total control of the complexity of every organization with its specificities, process, and data flows for one or more user groups requiring specific journey or level of shared data. So that's the starting point for us. The internal trigger for us was, how can we reduce the anxiety of our clients thinking about, I have to do events in a completely different way from what I experienced in my life. And then we have, of course, also a bunch of features. We have front-end features, we have back-end features, we have server implementation, travel and transport features, we have badge printing, we have visa management, everything that you can imagine is needed to create an event outside the physical world is something that we have in our platform, and it's absolutely working. And engagement is at the core of this platform, because we want for any colleague or any division to create a long-term connection. And that's, if you think about it, it's the augmented area of our platform. So we are not only talking about let's take an event and turn it in a digital event. It's about creating a different approach for an event. And ideally, when everybody is going to be back to normal and we are going to have traditional events and meetings, the idea here is to implement and augment the experience to allow you not only to have the physical experience, but also the long-term value of a connection through a digital platform that allows you to interact horizontally with other colleagues and also vertically with the company that creates the event on the long-term point. And of course, it's also in white label. So the INCON Digital platform is fully customizable, because a part of anxiety for my clients is also, yeah, but I don't want to use, I don't know, Google Meet, or I don't want to use Zoom because that's another brand. I want to be me talking to my clients. And that's why we also create the opportunity to have a completely white label with our client's logo, our client's graphics, and we can also integrate inside the most used tool that organization traditionally use through API integrations. So at the end of the day, it's a digital platform. So we also have all the data, all the information, all the KPI inside this platform that allows us from the start to finish to understand where's our client, what is their need, and how can we address that need in real time to make it more and more valuable. In other words, we can do brainstorming in this platform. We can do one-to-one network. We can do Q&A. We can do compliance. We can do whatever kind of interactions that traditionally took place in an event is something that we can do on this platform, but we are augmented the experience, allowing all the digital data, all the digital information to be part of this process and to be part of this product and service. A quick overview about that. But of course, if you want more information, if you want more in-depth information about the features, about the costs, about whatever is needed, please feel free to get in touch with me directly or with Dime Group, and we are pretty happy to share with you all the other data. And of course, it's also pretty outstanding looking that kind of service also on the event part on mobile, because that's where people live. That's where people, when they are experiencing the event in real life, that's where they are. So we make sure that it was mobile only platform. That was it for today. So I hope I covered all the topics that I promised to you when we started. There's a long journey from thinking about a product, starting from internal trigger, to ending up with something concrete and delivered to our clients. We are pretty happy about the example that we share with you today and with the results that we have in terms of business. And I'm here to answer your question if you have them. So thank you for your attention.